Day 54 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Here's what I thought might be a bright spot. I was sitting next to a group of seniors and they were having a lively conversation about all of their medical ailments. And over the course of a half hour or so, didn't bring up politics once. Besides the realities of aging, everything seemed completely pleasant, fine, and fun. Until I heard, "Did you hear that measles is back?" It was said like this development is a curiosity. Like, "Did you hear that the McRib is back?" As if this was not only something not worth being concerned about, but was actually kind of cool. Like, as if they were just talking about, "Did you hear that this restaurant now serves Asiago steak sandwiches?" Yes, I was at the P. Look, if you want to let your child die from measles because you think it's God's plan, well, then you go right ahead and you do that. Because if you want to do that, if you want to let your child die in the name of owning the libs, well, I have some very bad news for you. I am not owned. You're the one that's owned. You know how I know that? Because you're the one thinking about owning somebody. I'm not thinking about owning somebody. The child who died in Texas from measles is the first measles death in the US in a decade. I couldn't give a flying fuck what you do with your life because I'm doing what I want to do with mine. It's a goddamn shame that the senselessness and selfishness of ideologically warped people kept that child from finding out what they wanted to do with their life. Keep devoting less and less time to disinformation and the people who propagate propaganda. Keep using that reclaimed energy and regain time to love the ones you're with. Keep ignoring the Trump administration. Peace. Day 55 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. The current episode of the podcast Search Engine is about American manufacturing. The point it brings up as it describes the efforts of an engineer and his business partner to manufacture a new kind of barbecue grill scrubber completely in the United States is relevant to ignoring the Trump administration. This episode discusses the fact that while manufacturing continues in America in terms of making the parts and assembling the products, making the machines and mechanisms that make the parts to assemble into products are exclusively created overseas. This began initially because of savings, but has now developed into necessity because a generation has passed without handing down the knowledge of tool and die creation. Because of this, foreign manufacturers poach intellectual property because they have the designs in their hands. It is basically a given that cheap knockoffs of every product will flood the market even before the authentic manufacturer can roll theirs out. I won't give away how this episode ends, but it made me think about how I am sure we can all agree that it would be nice if products that we can afford were exclusively created and manufactured from top to bottom in America. I think we can all agree that it isn't right for intellectual property to be stolen and for American inventors and entrepreneurs to be taken advantage of. If the possibility exists for a renewed future for American tool and die, it is not going to happen by making enemies of our allies and imposing tariffs that the American people will have to suffer. American manufacturing absolutely won't return through the force of men who are more interested in exerting power to create chaos and disorder that undermines our ability to live life in a non-chaotic and non-disordered way as they increase their wealth. There is a way to bring people together over our issues, common goals, and aspirations, but the leader of the Trump administration and his loyalists will never be the people who are going to do that, because these people are people who are more interested in keeping that from happening. The government is supposed to be part of us. The government is meant to work with us. That is not what this government is doing. These are people to ignore. The Trump administration. Day 56 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. Day 56, congratulations. That's 4%. 4% of the way through 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. That's pretty damn good, and things are pretty damn scary right now. So I will take this moment to reiterate the essential points of this exercise. One, we are consuming way too much information, too much news. And when we do peek at that news, boy, oh boy, it's not looking good. But when I am out there in the world, when I am at the P or any other coffee shop or just doing my thing, out there at the track, walking around, getting a little exercise, getting those steps in. By the way, do you know the 10,000 steps thing? Total lie. Made up. Not true. But going for a walk is true. Historically, as human beings, going for a walk is a nice thing. There's nice nature out there. I saw birds. I saw trees. I saw clouds. All sorts of things that do not pay any attention to the Trump administration. You think a cloud is paying attention to the Trump administration? No. We need to be more like that cloud. Why? Because when we pay too much attention to all this news, which is not good news. Now, it depends on where you look. But where I look, and I do look, I admit it, I look. I can't help myself. I got to look. But I know when I'm looking, Josh, this is not what you should be doing because it creates friction, which brings me to point two. When we eliminate some of that friction and we allow an environment for us to glide around our lives a little bit more freely, that allows us the time to do the things that are good for our souls, that are good for our minds, that are good for our happiness, joy, and prosperity. And those things could include making art. Those things could include writing a song. Those things could include cooking a meal. Those things could include, well, my cat is right here. That could include spending time with your pet. So one, here on the day that we arrive at 4% of our journey through 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration, I remind you and remind myself at the same time to pay less attention to all this information. It will arrive at our doorstep in one way or another. I guarantee that. It's just going to happen. So we do not need to indulge, spend less time with the information. And two, reclaim that time, regain your mind to pay attention to things that matter. Yourself, your happiness, your prosperity, your joy while you're here, your loved ones, your friends, and the new friends you will make along the way as you continue to spend 1,461 days ignoring the Trump administration. Day 57 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. My name is Josh. I'm just trying to help myself. I put the hashtag hope in my post yesterday, which I had never put in there before. And I've noticed that when you put a hashtag in your post, what really happens is that you end up with posts that are about that hashtag. So I started receiving on my page all sorts of posts about hope, but they were not positive posts about hope. They were posts about not having hope, very serious, looking dead into the camera about how we should just give up and be miserable or fight like we've never fought before. Well, how exactly does that happen? My way of fighting is to do exactly what I'm doing now, which is to take what I know and take what I understand about life and people in general and try to encourage others to see the world that way. And when I'm done with this post, when I'm done pressing post, I go out into my life and I try to interact with people in a way that lifts them up, that acknowledges their spirit, that acknowledges the things that aren't bringing them down in the world. And when I am doing that, I'm not like, hi, I'm Josh. Can I be of help to you? No, I'm just like here at the P, this wonderful cashier who always says hi to me by name. Hi, Josh. And I say, hey, how are you? And it's just like that. That's what life's about. Hey, how are you? If you are going to come on some app and not be, hey, how are you? And instead be hope. What is hope? Why should we have it? Everything is going to hell. Well, then I think that the people who are watching are probably going to be more miserable when they're done watching their video now, aren't they? I think you know that they are. All of this being said, Yes, it is scary. Yes, it is uncertain. Yes, what the Trump administration is doing is absolutely bonkers to us because we have not seen or experienced anything like this in our lifetimes. But I guarantee you that things in the world have been this awful before. Things in the world have been this awful from the moment I started this video and other places. We can survive this. And if you don't want to call that hope, well, call it something else. Call it dope. Call it Pope. Those are things that have meaning to people. But for me, hope means that you believe there can be a better day. And I also am of the belief that that better day can be made more better by dealing with the current situation and by ignoring the Trump administration. Day 58 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger is not BS. What so many of us are experiencing and going through right now with the uncertainty, the chaos, and the unprecedented behavior that we're witnessing by the Trump administration is challenging, to put it mildly. These are people who can bring real consequences that will have lasting impact on our lives, far beyond the moment that it took to make the decisions that result in those consequences. The pain they can potentially exert on us is scary. We can survive it. We will be better for surviving it. When I have said that they should just go ahead and take us to the bottom, I say it because they're going to do it anyway. And when we survive that, we will be stronger for it. This experience will bring the people together eventually. This country went through a civil war followed by massive change that brought about greater understanding and respect for one another. This greater understanding and respect has not been total and it has not been perfect, but it has been progress. Just a few months ago, an already incredibly accomplished black woman received 74 million votes from a country that wouldn't have allowed her to vote for herself just 60 years ago. I refuse to believe that her election loss is an end. It is a beginning, and that beginning is the result of a prologue that has been told since the founding of this nation. We can survive this until we move on to leadership that is more interested, committed, and passionate about helping people from every walk of life live a better life. Keep ignoring the Trump administration. Day 59 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I'm not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I really do enjoy the voices of some of my favorite political podcasters. I have not unsubscribed because I make mindful decisions based on real circumstances rather than panic over what I do not know. When you get used to hearing a voice that you enjoy, it's like hearing the voice of a friend. So when I see that there's a new episode of Pod Save America or the Bulwark podcast, I go and listen for a few minutes because I enjoy those personalities. But that being said, first, when I check in on these shows, as soon as they play a clip of the leader of the Trump administration, I immediately turn that off because I find that voice unpleasant. I have the opposite reaction to that voice. That is the voice of someone I do not want to know. That voice kinda creeps me out. Secondly, part of ignoring the Trump administration is becoming more adept at critical thinking, and I am not above criticizing my own. I know that these podcasters have to fill time. They have to do a podcast every day, and so what are they going to talk about? They have to discuss every single utterance that comes out of the leader of the Trump administration's tiny mouth. As a New Yorker, I am someone who has grown up with the leader of the Trump administration in my periphery, and I watched The Apprentice throughout its many seasons because of the fact that this dopey dude is pretty entertaining as a game show host. I know that a lot of what he says is just to get people to react, and unfortunately, he's getting what he wants from these podcast hosts. Even worse, their reactions only result in their audience reacting. They just get people upset. When you listen to that, you don't say, oh, it's good to have this information. I will check back in tomorrow when I can get some more information. That's not what it is. It's meant to make you upset so that you keep tuning in, so that you keep staying upset. I don't hold it against these guys. They're doing their job. They have an audience to serve. There are plenty of people in that audience that would be even more upset if they didn't do their show at all. But I'm not one of them. I like to hear their voices for a moment. It's not like they're the family member that you see once a year and you don't think about it any other time. It's not like that. I respect these people, but I also know that they're just trying to fill time because, unlike us, they don't have a choice to ignore the Trump administration. Day 60 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name is Josh, and I am just trying to help myself. Live and let live. These words were on my wall growing up, even though there was not a lot of living and let living going on in my particular household. But I understood the message anyway, and I understand it today. The message is to live life and let others live their lives, and that is an idea that I have been bringing to this conversation over the last 60 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration, because living to the fullest is even more important when we are feeling like others are trying to keep us from living. A big part of living to the fullest is keeping our hearts and minds as stress-free as possible. That takes practice. Ignore the Trump administration as any source of useful information. Reclaim your mind. Regain your time. Another big part is the letting live piece. That takes even more practice. Now you may say, well, Josh, it seems like what the members of the Trump administration are doing when they're living their lives is trying to keep me from living mine. I'm telling you this. They seem to think that that is what we are doing to them. They think that by thriving and surviving by our own ethics, moral codes, and sense of compassion and empathy for others, we are a threat to them. This is because they have convinced themselves that while they break man-made laws, they are still living by the Lord's laws. Even though the hypocrisy is off the charts, they still feel that they are doing God's work on earth. Let's continue to set an example of living and letting live. Whether or not that brings about an outcome that is beneficial to us personally or for the world entire, we will only know if we try. In the meantime, we can enjoy our time here on Earth. And I have a confession to make. My previous statement about not knowing if live and let live will change the world is false. It won't. Supporters of the Trump administration will not change unless they want to. The will to change comes from within. You have to want to change. But setting an example is a way to affirm and improve the way we are interacting with the world around us as we continue to focus on ourselves, our loved ones, the people we care about, as we continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 61 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name's Josh. I'm just trying to help myself. What kind of bad habits do you have to soothe yourself during times of stress? I find that when I am stressed, I tend to eat too many sweets. You name it, I love it. Why do people keep popping up on my For You page with the latest miniature sheet cake from Trader Joe's? It's really not fair. Especially when they have a lemon cake now. I love lemon. Have you tried the lemon cookie from Levain Bakery? It's back, and it's fabulous. You know that another creator blocked me because I corrected her for repeatedly pronouncing Levain incorrectly. It's Levain, not Levain. But anyway, sweets are very calorie dense. So when you're eating a bunch of sweets, you're consuming a bunch of calories and an enormous amount of processed sugar. So you are both taking in too many calories and also elevating your blood sugar level, which is not a good thing to be doing because it exacerbates the stresses that cause you to eat those sweets in the first place. It's an endless cycle. What does this have to do with ignoring the Trump administration? Well, I would equate this not so sweet consuming of sweets with consuming too much information about the Trump administration. A little bit of information is a nice little treat to allow us to feel like we are satisfying our cravings. But when we overconsume, all we end up doing is devolving into decadence, indulging our impulses, and making ourselves sick and unhappy. I try to remind myself that a little goes a long way. I can consume what I want. Currently, I want that lemon sheet cake, but with boundaries. Now is not the time to be weakened in mind, body, or spirit as we continue 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. Day 62 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name is Josh. I'm just trying to help myself. We are all oppressed by the rich. Even the mildly rich are oppressed by the even richer. Let's not worry about them right now. Let's talk about those of us who work for someone else. Someone else who takes advantage of our time and labor for their financial gain and doesn't share those gains with the company or the world. Now, don't get it twisted. I don't mean the cool people who own a small business and treat their employees well because they understand the value of cultivating loyal employees. I don't even mean larger businesses that treat employees well because, like us, they are ethical and have a sense of community and morality. I don't mean the self-employed who take the massive risk of foregoing a steady paycheck in exchange for personal freedom and the thrill of self-sufficiency. I'm talking about the ones who top-down treat their employees like property. To them, we are here to serve the interests of the rich and to help the rich profit. All of us, from every walk of life. These people, like those who comprise the Trump administration and align with their ideologies, try to distract and fool us into not realizing that we are being subjugated. They would like us to focus on culture issues such as gender, skin color, and if Chapel Roan is corrupting the youth, which I hope she is because that means she's doing a great job. But you know what I mean. Instead of all of us, red and blue alike, just enjoying doing the hot to-go dance again this summer, we are working to death to pay for the privilege. These distractions that the rich and powerful members of the Trump administration use to divide us are actually what will ultimately bring us together when we all realize that we fall under one umbrella that we share in common. We work to make the rich richer. And once we decide that we don't want to do that anymore, then we can all come together under that common cause to make our lives better by working to take that system apart. Continue to ignore the Trump administration. Day 63 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. My name is Josh. I'm just trying to help myself. I have to state that what you are about to hear is sarcasm. You know, I really aspire to the morality of the leader of the Trump administration because in the X amount of years, no pun intended, that he has been in public political life, if you have noticed, he has done nothing wrong. There is only wrongdoing by other people. He has never done anything wrong, and all other people only do wrong and are very bad people unless they are doing what he wants them to do or saying what he wants them to say. And when that happens, then those other people are no longer on his shit list. I have to wonder, now that I have gotten this incredibly sarcastic preamble out, if there will ever come a time when the people who support this dopey dude, the subordinate flunkies in his administration and in the House and Senate who stand behind him, will ever say, you know, it's not possible for someone to be right all the time. I know they already know this, but perhaps they would actually start to say this because life is short, ultimately. You never know when it's gonna end. So you would think that maybe some of these people might want to sort of level up their souls before their time comes due. And one way to do that would be to stop denying reality, because it's frankly impossible for every single person to be in the wrong except for this one guy who has been proven to be one of Earth's biggest pieces of shit. Perhaps it might be time to call it out before it's too late. For these people, I do not recommend continuing to ignore the Trump administration. Day 64 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. What we know and what we believe are not the same thing. Have you ever heard of flat earthers? These are people who believe the earth is flat, or at least that is what they say. I cannot speak for a flat earther, but I am making the leap right now to say that a flat earther knows the earth is not flat. However, a flat earther is committed to the reality that they have set out for themselves and the world that they live in, the flat world. They have spent years coming to terms with this position in order to allow them to emphatically, confidently, and publicly settle into this belief. There is very little chance for them to ever change that belief, because to change that belief, you have to come to an understanding with yourself. Everything that came before is a lie. That you emphatically, confidently, and publicly lied about who you are, not necessarily about the facts themselves, and that's much more difficult to admit and integrate into the person you want to be after that life of lying. A personal story of my own would be coming out in the year 2002. I was 30 years old, which these days is very late to be coming out. One of the reasons I could not come to terms with what I knew since I was very young was because I believed that I could be straight if I wanted to, and I believed that the image of myself as a straight person that I had put out in the world all my life, knowing that I was not, was too far a road to go down to be able to turn around and choose a different path of truth and self-actualization. But I did that because I came to terms with the idea that I did not want to, quote unquote, live a lie, which is a term that people use. I didn't feel like I was living a lie. I felt like I wasn't living a life as a person who believed what they know. I hope that all flat earthers will one day have a similar experience and come to believe what they know and start to ignore the Trump administration.